It's strange how a life, a marriage, can unravel in the quietest of ways. There wasn't a fight that morning. No slammed doors. No shouting match that echoed through the halls. Just silence. A heavy, unsettling silence that had been growing for a while. He had been different for weeks, maybe months. Slower. More tired. I'd noticed the little things, the things you only see when you've spent a lifetime with someone. The way his hand trembled when he tried to lift his coffee cup. A slight tremor he'd try to hide. Or how he would lose his words mid-sentence, his train of thought derailing. And then he'd just stop, pretending it never happened. I told him gently at first, then with more urgency. "You need to see a doctor." He'd always wave it away. "Stop worrying," he'd say, a touch of annoyance in his voice. "I'm just tired." But it was more than tired. It was a fog I could see him disappearing into, and I was powerless to pull him out. Then came that morning, Father's Day, the one day meant to celebrate him, but the house was still, too still. He didn't get out of bed. I walked into our room, the morning light filtering through the blinds, and my heart sank. He was awake, but his eyes were wide with a confusion that terrified me. He reached out to me, his hand shaking uncontrollably now. He tried to speak, to tell me what was wrong. But his words were gibberish, a jumble of sounds that made no sense. Panic seized me. I screamed for our daughter, who was visiting for the weekend. "Call 911, now!" The next few hours are a blur, a collage of flashing lights, worried paramedics, and the sterile, indifferent smell of a hospital. I remember sitting in the waiting room, my gaze fixed on a single insignificant spot on the wall until it blurred into a hazy smudge. And I remember praying, not the kind of prayer that begs for miracles, but the desperate, whispered kind that just pleads. "Please, just let us make it through this. Please." The doctors finally came out. Their faces were serious but calm. "It was a stroke," they said. "A major one." They spoke of recovery, of therapy, of time. "It will take time," they repeated. I nodded, mumbled my thanks, and tried to remember how to breathe. The air felt thick, heavy, impossible to draw into my lungs. For months, my life became a routine of caregiving. I became his nurse, his cook, his memory. I pureed his food, helped him bathe, laid out his medications in neat little rows. I learned the language of his groans, the subtle shifts in his expression. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I'd lie awake for hours, my ears straining for any sound from his room, listening in case he needed me during the night. Every single day I told myself this was love. This was devotion. This was in sickness and in health. This was what it meant to stand by your partner. But while I was piecing him back together, something inside of me was quietly, relentlessly breaking apart. The stroke had changed him. But not just physically. A cruelty I'd never seen before began to surface. It wasn't loud or violent. It was a quiet, insidious kind of pain. Sharp words that would slice through me when I least expected it. He'd blame me for his condition, for the blandness of his food, for the sun being too bright. He'd refuse to eat the meals I'd spent hours preparing, pushing the plate away with a look of disgust. His words were the kind that cut deep, but leave no visible mark. I would tell myself over and over, "He's sick. He doesn't mean it. It's the stroke talking." But there are things you can't unhear, no matter how much you try to forgive. The hurt lodged itself in my chest, a permanent ache. And then, one day, he was gone. Just gone. I came home from the grocery store to find his closet empty, his wheelchair missing, and a note on the kitchen counter. It wasn't a goodbye, not really. It was a cold, brief explanation. He'd gone to live with his sister. He wrote it as if I was the one who had done something wrong, as if I were the burden he needed to escape. I searched for answers. I replayed every memory, every difficult moment, every sacrifice. I dissected our conversations, looking for a clue, a reason. But all I found was emptiness, a hollow space where our life used to be. A strange kind of guilt washed over me. He was still alive out there somewhere, but our marriage wasn't. It had died, not with a bang, but with a slow, agonizing whimper. And I felt guilty for surviving it. I had spent so many years being afraid of losing him, of what life would be like on my own. And yet, when it finally happened, when the thing I dreaded most came to pass, the overwhelming emotion wasn't fear or sadness. It was relief, a quiet, profound, and deeply guilty sense of relief. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I didn't have to hold my breath, bracing for the next storm, the next cutting remark. The house was silent, yes, but it was a peaceful silence. My silence. I remember sitting on the back porch one evening, a few weeks later, just watching the sun dip below the trees. The fading light hit the windows of the house just right, making them glow like gold. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. I felt possibility. I had no idea who I was without him. For so long, I had been his wife, his caregiver. My identity was intertwined with his, but sitting there in the quiet glow of the evening, I realized I was finally ready to find out. My story wasn't over. In fact, a new chapter was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If this resonated with you in any way, I'd be so grateful if you'd like and subscribe. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next video.